All right, so we're going to be going over some regional terms today. So the reason we're going to be talking about these is because it's kind of an introduction to the anatomy. This is the basic naming of the body parts. We're going to go over some of them. There's a lot more detail. We're going to go over some of the basic ones that you are responsible for knowing. And the reason this is important is because as we're going throughout the semester, we're encountering each of the different systems and looking into each of the different systems. We're going to be coming across different names of things. And as we're coming across different names of things, if at the beginning of the semester you have taken into consideration and you have learned these different regional terms, then it's going to make it much, much easier for you to continue through the semester and learn these terms as we're going into each of the different systems. So our regional terms is what we're going to be working on today, also called body regions. So our body regions, and these are the names for each of these different body regions. So we're going to go ahead and zoom into our person here, and we're going to start at the top and just take a look at each of these different areas here. So first, when we're talking about the entire head region here, so the whole head from about the chin all the way up to the top, we're talking about cephalic. So this is the cephalic region of the body. So whenever we're talking about something related to cephalic, then what we're talking about is the head region. And then if we start at the top of the head, so we're going to break the head down even further. So the top of the head, if we're talking about up in this region here, up above to here, then we're talking about the cranial region. So this is the cranium. Oftentimes this is what we're thinking of when we think of the skull. So the cranium or the cranial region. And then if we move down a little bit further, if we go from this kind of part right here all the way down to the chin, then we're breaking up the cephalic region, the head region, into the cranial region, which is the skull. And then also this area here, I'm going to kind of draw around here. Oh, that's a pretty bad one here, so let's do like this. Then we're talking about the facial region, of course, so as related to the face. So we've taken our cephalic region, which is the head here, and we've split it up into the top portion, which is the cranial region, and then the bottom portion, which is the facial region. And then we can take the facial region, and we're going to split it up into even smaller parts. So if we look at the eye is the ocular region. So ocular or orbital. So these things are going to come in handy, as I said, throughout the semester as we're looking into each different thing. But very specifically, like the orbicularis oris or the orbicularis oculi in this case. So the orbicularis oculi is a specific muscle, and it's the muscle that's around the ocular or the eye. So knowing these terms ahead of time is really going to help you when we move into things like the muscular system and even the skeletal system and every system basically. But learning these ahead of time will be very helpful. So we have our facial region that we're splitting up into the ocular, which is the eye region. If we go to just below the ocular region into this region, this is our cheek, which we call the buccal region. So buccal is related to the cheek. We have the buccinator muscle, which is the major muscle on the cheek region there. Then here, if we're talking about the nose, right? The nose is the nasal region. The nasal region is the nose. And I recommend writing these down and going through this as I'm going through this. Maybe draw your own stick figure or something and draw these in just to kind of familiarize yourself with these as we're going through them. So the nasal region, if we move down to the mouth is the oral region. So that's where the oris comes in. So the orbicularis oris is the muscle that is around the mouth. The oral cavity or the oral region is the oris. So then if we are going to move out of the head region, out of the cephalic region, we move down further into the human body. So remember, we're down here at the chin. If we go from the chin all the way to here, basically the neck, that neck region is our cervical region. And that's helpful because when we're going to be taking a look at the bones, at the skeletal system, we're going to look at the different vertebrae. So if I go over here, here in the right with this side image here. What we're looking at here is the cervical region. And this is very helpful because the bones, right, the vertebrae that are in this region here are the cervical vertebrae. So knowing that that's the cervical region ahead of time, again, is going to help you with learning the different names of the bones that you're expected to know. So the region from the chin, which is basically the bottom of the skull, basically, to the bones that are in the shoulder region, which, of course, we'll talk about throughout the semester, so you know the technical terms. But this region here is the cervical region. Then if we move down further, if we kind of cut off the arms here, and then we start at the top or at the bottom of the cervical region, and we go down, we're going to go right to, we can imagine the ribs are right here. So it's going to be just under the ribs, just below the ribs. This region is called the thoracic region. So the thoracic region. And then, of course, this will be helpful when we talk about the vertebrae as well, because we have our thoracic vertebrae. So let's just do it over here on this image as well. Thoracic. All right, so thoracic is the chest region. So the chest. And actually we have right just about at the bottom of the rib cage, we have a large muscle called the diaphragm that's going to separate the thoracic region up at the top, and then down below that, our abdominal region. So here, this is our abdominal region. So the abdominal region is, you know, the abdomen, the stomach area. If we want to continue with the torso here, we can move down from the abdominal region, and then we're going to kind of cut down here. So we're at the bottom of the abdominal region. We'll kind of cut this region here is our pelvic region. So the pelvis. Below that, down here, is our genital region here. So that includes the genitals. So for the male, that would include the scrotum and the testes as well as the penis. And here it includes all of the external female genitalia. So we're done with the torso region here in as much detail as we're going to get into, with the exception of, we can talk about the torso region being here as well. This region right here, this is where our leg meets up with the torso, and this is the inguinal region. So this is where our leg meets our torso, is the inguinal region. If we want to continue moving down the body, we'll come back up to the arms. If we continue moving down, we can say that this region here, kind of to the side of the inguinal region here, these are our hips, also known as the coxal region. So coxal, which is the hip region. Moving down some more, then we go from our inguinal and coxal regions to just above the knee here. This region is the femoral region. So femoral, because this is where we find our largest, strongest bone, the femur. So this would be the upper leg. Then if we go from the bottom of the femoral region here to just below the knee, just below the kneecap here, the front, see there's a difference now when we're talking about the front of the body versus the back of the body. So the front of the body, this is called the patellar region. And it's the patellar region because our knee bone is called the patella. So our knee bone is only on the front of the body, and that's our patella, and so that's the patellar region. Now, if we're talking about the back, then that's the popliteal. And so that's why I have this image up here. So in the back, actually I can just draw this long line. So in the back here, we have our popliteal, and then in the front, so this would be our knee region here. So the back is the popliteal, and in the front we have our patellar. Moving down again, we go to just above the ankle, so below the knee to above the ankle. And this also has a front and a back to it. So the front is the crural region. So that's the front of the lower leg. And then if we're talking about the back, then we're talking about the sural. right, so we'll do that over here as well. So just above the ankle. So the back here, I'll just draw our line there, is the sural, and then, not what I meant to do, sorry about that. And then up here, the front is the crural. All right, so then as we're moving down again, if we go to just below our ankle, again, we'll talk about all the technical terms for this, but just above the ankle there, or just below the ankle region is our tarsal region, or the tarsals, and that's the name of the bones. The general name of the bones in the ankle are called the tarsals, so this is our tarsal region. Then when we're taking into consideration the entire foot, I'm going to do that over here. If we're talking about the entire foot, then what we're talking about is pedal. This is our pedal region or pedal region. You can think about that because that's what we use to pedal things. You know, we put our feet, the whole foot is on the pedal, and we're moving the pedals, so the pedal region. And then we actually break up the foot into different parts as well. So the toes themselves, so if we just look at the toes are called digits. So this is the digital region, the digits. And we'll get up to the arms as well, but the fingers are also called the digits. So we have the digits of our upper extremities, or the arms, our upper limbs, and then we have the digits in our lower limbs. So we have the digits, or the digital region. So the digital region, these are our toes. And then the last one we're going to talk about in relationship to the foot is actually the bottom of the foot. So I'm just going to kind of put an arrow under here. The bottom of the foot, the underside of the foot, is the region called the plantar region. So I'm going to put bottom. So it's the bottom of the foot is the plantar region. And I usually think of this because I think of something silly, like I'm going to lift up my foot and look at the bottom, and that's where I get plantar warts. I don't, but that's where someone could get plantar warts. So the plantar region is the bottom part of the foot. All right, so we've kind of gone down the center of the body here. I've talked about some of the difference between the front and the back. And then I'm going to move back up and actually talk about the limbs here, although I did just notice that I didn't include over here. Another reason I have this side here in the torso, we were talking about in this region here. Okay, we had our pelvic region, right? So we have the pelvic region, which is the front region, as well as the inguinal. Remember, the inguinal is where we have our leg connected to the torso. The inguinal, pelvic. And then, so these are the front, right? So we're talking about the front regions here, and then the back here is the gluteal. So when we're talking about the butt cheeks, we're talking about the gluteal region. And that's, of course, because our largest muscle back there is the gluteus maximus. We also have a gluteus minimus, and those are the muscles back there. So that's our gluteal region. So now we're going to move up into the arms. So I think what I will do is kind of scoot in here and do this right arm. So I'm going to talk about her right arm. So we're going to skip some of these, but this part that we're going to talk about first is we're moving back up here, and we are going to go from the top of the arm, so the shoulder here, to just above the elbow. So the upper part of the arm there. So the upper part of the arm there is called brachial. So this is the brachial region, so the upper arm. And then where the arm then is connected to the torso, so this region right here, which we typically call the armpit, is actually the axillary region. So the axillary region is the armpit region. And that, again, will come in handy when we're talking about blood vessels, for example. So when we're talking about arteries and veins, we take our arteries and our veins, many of them are just very, very long, going all the way up, starting at the heart and going all the way down the arm to basically the fingers, mostly the hand. And along the way, we talk about those different regions in different ways so that we can be more specific when we're talking about things. So there's an axillary artery and there's a brachial artery, and it's basically all the same tube, but we've split it up based on these terms. So armpit region is the axillary region, then we have the upper part of the arm, so from the shoulder to above the elbow is the brachial region. Then we have the elbow, so from above the elbow to below the elbow. And again, in this case, we have a front and a back. So I'm going to move over to the side view here. So if we're talking about here, so again, here's our armpit. I'll just do the same thing over here, the axillary region. And then from our shoulder here to the top part of our elbow, we're talking about brachial. And then when we're talking about the elbow, so top of the elbow to the bottom of the elbow, when we're talking about the front of it, we're talking about cubital. It's the cubital region. It's called the cubital or the antecubital. So front, antecubital, or the cubital. And then, so I'll write front on that, sorry, front. And then when we're talking about the back, that's the olecranon region. And again, that's because there's the olecranon back there, which we'll get to when we get to the skeletal system. So the olecranon region. So this is the back. So that's what we think of when we actually think of the elbow, right? So the bony part of the elbow is the olecranon region. And then the front part, the softer part where it bends, is the cubital or the antecubital region. Then if we move down, I'm going to start over here where we already were. So if we're going from the bottom of the elbow to just above the wrist, this region is called the antebrachial. So the antebrachial region is what we would call the forearm, colloquial. So antebrachial is the bottom part of the arm, brachial is the upper part of the arm. I can do that over here on the anatomical position forward facing. I'm moving back over to the one on the left here. So this is antebrachial. So that's the forearm. And then when we move to the bottom of the antebrachial there, which is actually the top of the wrists, or the wrist bones, to the bottom of the wrist bones, when we're actually talking about the wrist, that's carpal. So that's the carpal region. That's because our bones there are called the carpals. All right. So then when we move into the hand itself is called manus. I'm not super concerned that you know that, but manus or manual. But we do want to break the hand into different pieces. So there's the two parts that you should be familiar with here. We already mentioned one of them, if you can remember that. Can you remember? It's also related to the feet. So the toes, right, the toes are the digits. So when we break up the hand, we're breaking up the hand into the digits, which are the fingers, which is digital region, or the digits. And then we're talking about this region from the bottom of the wrist to the fingers, so this region in here. And if I can draw a long line here, then that's the palmar region, which you probably sounds familiar to you as being the palm. So the palm of the hand is the palmar region, then we have the digits. So these are all of the regional terms that you should be familiar with. Again, I recommend taking either printing out an image like this where there aren't any markings on it, or just drawing it on your own, and then going through and marking this up in just the same way that I did, just to become familiar with the different regions. And really understanding and really knowing these different regional terms is going to help you immensely as we move through the semester and as you're looking into each of the different systems. Whoops.